days have put the unthinkable and the unthought into words, a conscious effort to break themselves free from the world constructed for them by men. Their language is very different from their male counterparts and they write with gay abandon. The écriture feminine is here to stay and the journey so far has been quite something. We take you into the writings in another tongue. Women's writing is a term that has moved beyond literary criticism to become a much accepted genre of writing. Eileen Showalter, in her book Towards a Feminist Politics, has traced the growth of women's writing into phases. It began, she says, with the feminine phase, where women wrote in imitation of male writers, upholding Victorian moralities of right, wrong and proper. Jane Austen, George Eliot and Charlotte Bronte are popular names here. Then came the feminist phase, where the writings were sometimes referred to as sex wars. Here, patriarchy and male dominance were openly questioned through strong, intense words. The last phase is the female, where women writers are comfortable in their own skin and write about their gender, sexuality, caste and political issues that affect them.
There has been a significant change, and one of the things I like about that change is that I think women, more than men, seemed to break into a category of writing which is both literary and commercial. I think that traditionally men's writing has had a lot of that, it's either literary or commercial, whereas I think women stepped into that to say, yes, you can write really good fiction and you can write really sort of literary style fiction, but it also could be highly readable, page-turning fiction.
Women, says Helene Sirkos, must write herself, must write about women and bring women to writing, from which they have been driven away as violently as from their bodies. On Women's Day, we salute these writers of womenism, those voices that rose above the din, those stories that took courage to pen, and those writings in another tongue. The latest buzzword Afropolitan, which represents multilingual global Africans, is her coinage. The New York Times called her first work, The Sex Lives of African Girls, as a standout piece of fiction. Tai Selassie speaks to us about the life she knows best. When you wrote the story, weren't you worried about stereotyping the whole image
of African women?
Yes.
You know, it's funny, I was speaking with an Indian journalist earlier today, and she actually put it better than I've been able to. She said, when I heard that title, it occurred to me that yes, in Africa, in India, in South America, in America, all around the world, for too many, the sex lives of girls begin at home. And that simple sentence, the sex lives of girls begin at home, really helped me clarify why I left such a generic title on such a specific story. It's because while I wrote a story about one girl in middle-class Ghana named Edem, very specific, her reality is a reality shared by so many girls across the continent and indeed around the world. And so if nothing else, the title, I think, speaks to how all too generic and how all too common is the experience of a young girl being molested by someone in her family. And so I don't worry in this case that it's too non-specific, because indeed it's the non-specificity that is the problem.
Most writers, if they're Afro-American or if they're African, they write about particular issues, serious issues.
War, famine,
yes,
food,
yes,
hunger,
absolutely. So tell me about your experience writing about something that is not generally written or spoken about.
I just think it's high time. I think that enough has been said about the political economy, about the sociology of the political economy, and about the civil warfare in West Africa. I can speak most specifically about the part of the continent from whence I come. I say basta, enough. I think that those stories need to be told, they should be told, they are being told, they have been told. sometimes I think journalists are better suited to the task, but there have been beautiful novels written about the same. What I haven't seen as a reader, more so than as a writer, are stories that are willing to deal with the human realities that abound in Africa and in West Africa in particular. And the American writer Toni Morrison once said, "I wrote my first book because nobody else did. She wrote what she wanted to read." And I've longed for stories about people in Africa. I've longed for stories about marriage and love and friendship and betrayal, and I haven't found so many. So I suppose at some point I just decided, very well then, I'll write one.
So would you say Toni Morrison is a person who's inspired you?
Certainly in America, Toni Morrison is the writer who has influenced me the most. But in this part of the world, it would be Arundhati Roy. In Italy, where I live, it would be Alessandro Barrico. I love so many writers for pretty much the same reason, because they are able to play in that space between truth and beauty, between form and content, between lyric and structure, that I myself aspire to occupy. And so Nabokov also immediately comes to mind. There are so many who do that, few who do it well, and those I would call my idols.
So you are a person who's traveled much, lived in many parts of the world. Has those experiences shaped the way you write or influenced you in the way you write?
A few things. First of all, I think writers have eyes on the palms of their hands. So I write about, and all writers write about, things that they've never seen, and that is our craft. So I've been blessed to be able to travel extensively. I have family sort of flung around the world, and I delight in spending time in those places. I take notes with my memory on all that I see. But at the same time, I don't think one has to be someplace in order to write about it. I don't think that a writer has to be from Ghana to write about Ghana. I'm from Ghana, but I'm also from Nigeria. I live in Italy. I grew up in the States. I've lived in New York. And I would never purport to write for the people of Ghana nor speak for the same. Rather, I think that I, like any writer, I draw on what I've seen, what I know, the particulars that I've encountered, but also the commonalities. And from that, I put together in some way or another a sense of human experience in a particular place. And I think that that makes me no different than any writer, regardless of where he or she may be from.
So about this particular topic, what's the reaction in Ghana to the kind of writing that you do?
Very lovingly, because my family lives there. The whole country would be hard to say. I think I'll know more about the reaction in West Africa to my writing when my novel is published at the end of the year. It's called Ghana Must Go, and I suspect that that is when I will come face to face with my West African reader, as yet rather timid in his or her response. So I'll keep you posted.
Do you believe that a writer should be responsible or should be allowed to just express his or her views?
As a writer, I think we have the responsibility to tell the truth. To tell the truth as beautifully as we can and not to obscure it when we have found it. I don't think a writer has any other obligation apart from that.
And could you tell us, final question would be, could you tell us about your life here in Delhi?
Oh, again! I came to India for the first time in 2006 for a wedding, as you do. And I just fell in love. I was saying, someone asked me why, and I said, when you meet someone for the first time and you fall in love, you don't know why until later. There's just something in that moment that speaks to you, that says, this is one of the many places in the world that you can call home, and I have. My family lives in Chhatrapur, just outside of Delhi, well, a bit outside in traffic, and I find it to be one of the best places on earth to write. When I get there, I sit at the table, I look at the flowers, I listen to the birds, all the cliches, the color, the dust, the cows, the food,
the traffic,
the
noise.
traffic, all of it, for some reason, brings me back. It just brings me to where I am, and I think the best writing is done by a writer who is where she or he is in that moment. And for some reason, when I'm here in India, I'm fully here in myself. And so for that reason, I come back every year.
Thai Selassie is currently working on her novel, Ghana Must Go, and this is one of the eagerly anticipated books of this year. writings in another tongue have imageries that are painfully beautiful, have stories that few have heard about, and have thoughts that are worth their weight in gold. Life was sweet in Iran before the revolution. And Carmen writes about the sweeter side of her life and Iran before the revolution. The first question that I asked you when I met you was, you're a very colorful person from the looks of it, and you're a writer and a poet and based out of, you're an Iranian by birth, so that's the monochrome of Iran and the colorfulness of you. Could you tell us a little about that?
Well, I love colors. I absolutely love them, you know. The Iran that I grew up in was not black and white, you know. And we, of course, particularly in the area that I was born, it's quite a kind of desert area. I suppose a little bit like here, that maybe there's not so much color in the landscape. So the people are colorful. And our buildings, you know, we have this turquoise is really the color of our buildings, and you can understand that because we call blue arbi, which means arb is water. It's the color of water, and you understand that in Iran. You know, you see desert landscapes brown, and with the turquoise dome of the mosque rising in the middle of, you know, the desert, and it's arbi. You know, it's water, it's life. So I think that's our love of color comes from that. I think that after the revolution, Iran became quite monochrome. And the first time that I went back there, it was still very much like that. You know, people were wearing muted colors, blacks, that kind of thing. But after '97, when President Khatami came into power and he gave a lot more social freedoms to people, then after that, when I started to notice that people were becoming more and more colorful. And we always said that, you know, before it was as if the women, you know, wore makeup by Bieber and stuff. They were like sort of butterflies fluttering around. And then there was a point in the late 90s when I went back and I said, oh, look, the butterflies are back in Tehran. You know, the girls were colorful again. They were wearing jolly headscarves with flowers and that kind of thing. I'm probably not quite as much as me, but...
But the writing that you write about is of an Iran that is very beautiful, while most of us are used to reading the monochrome part of Iran. Could you tell me about that, the cypress tree?
Well, you're absolutely, thank you for making that point, because that was very much one of my many motivations for writing this book, and writing it in the form that I did as a non-fiction, as a memoir, was that I wanted really to introduce the Iran that I know. The one that I grew up in, and the one that still exists actually, and that I see when I go back. I wanted to introduce that to the rest of the world. I wanted them to realize, you know, we're not living under the Taliban. It's not quite like that. And there are still a lot more freedoms than people perceive. There is a sort of, you know, the Iranian system is a curious system between a sort of authoritarian regime with elements of democracy. So it's really, of course, there is a side of it that is like the representation in the West, but that's not all of it. And so I'm very, very keen in my work to put across the other faces of Iran, because I think it's really important. You know, I've been for 30-something years in the West, and to be constantly living with a particular image of my country that is not the true image, that's very difficult. So since that I am privileged and lucky enough to be able to have a voice, to be able to write and express myself, and people are kind enough to publish me, I feel that it's very much my responsibility to introduce this other Iran.
And what about now? You've said that the butterflies are back, but do the women in Iran have the kind of freedom that is the freedom of speech there? Do the women have that kind of freedom that they should be getting?
Well, you know, no, but no one has it. It's not just the women. Of course, women, it is a patriarchal society. There's a lot of discrimination enshrined in the law. You know, a woman's testimony in court, for example, is worth half of a man. So if you have a witness, you need 2 women witnesses to corroborate 1 man. I mean, there's all of these kinds of terrible injustices which are indefensible. However, there is a lot of other freedoms that exist. You know, most importantly, I think women have very, very good access to education, you know, higher education in a way that just didn't exist in my mother's time, or even in my time in a way, and when I was growing up there, you know, before the revolution. And that's really important, you know, that's what will change society, because women are now, I mean, they comprise 65% of university graduates are women. We're overtaking the men, you know.
And the education, yes, but are they allowed to work and come up and do how much?
They can work. Can they get as high positions as the men? You know, it's not set in stone, but women can work, they have a public life, and you know, society there has changed as everywhere else. There's modern life now in Iran, you know, it's not like it used to be. And so the economic reality is that women actually, when you have a family, average family, both, you know,
the man and the woman.
The man and the woman, they both have to work.
And you've also spoken about the sexual politics of the Iranian community. If we could have a word on that also.
Well, you know, I think it's a really interesting area because one of the times that I was going back to Iran, one of my friends, who was a BBC reporter, was a very well-versed guy, sat down with me and said with a completely straight face, but of course no one in Iran has sex or drinks, right? So, of course, we're not human beings, you know, of course we do. And this is something that has really changed a lot actually in the last 30 years. There's a sort of sexual revolution that's taking place, has been taking place, and it continues to take place inside Iran. I've written about it. It really brings to light a lot of the difficulties that we face in modern Iran, which is really a lot to do with, even if we get rid of the regime and just talk about the culture. This is a culture in transition, and you know, the sexuality of young people is really, it's sort of the front line of the change of this transition between tradition and modernity. And the regime and those laws, they don't help this, of course, because they're trying to, you know, keep people in a place that they've naturally grown out of. And so it goes on anyway. But it maybe goes on in a way that is not necessarily as healthy for the people taking part. There is not so much sex education. People are not so aware of diseases, of the dangers, and without even coming to the emotional and psychological impact of the kind of things that people are facing there. You know, girls, they can date, boys, they date, you know, often they have relationships, but then sometimes, and then poof, when it comes to marriage, you know, boy still wants a virgin, you know, it goes back to the traditional thing. So there is, I've been writing about that through my own experiences as well, in order to highlight really some of these really interesting conflicts that there are inside modern Iran.
So if you could tell me about the work that you're doing now, what is it that you are working on currently? Or
well,
planning to work on?
I've obviously finished the Cyprus tree and it's come out,
yes.
And I'm absolutely lucky enough that I've spent the last 6 months going around the UK and now the world, talking about the Cyprus tree and using that as a platform to speak more and more about my country. I feel that we're in extreme danger this year of there being another terrible war. I can't bear it. I couldn't bear it, you know, and so if there's anything that I can do to help people understand that Iran is not what they think it is, because I think there's a gulf of sort of misunderstanding, you know, particularly between my country and America. Yes. Because there's been no relationship for 30-something years. They don't understand each other, they don't speak, they don't know what anything means. You know, some of the stuff that comes out of American policymakers' mouths, I mean, it just makes all of us go, what? Where are they getting this information? Who's advising them? So if there's even a tiny bit of awareness that I can bring to that debate, then I embrace it. So that's really, at the moment, that's what I'm doing. And hopefully soon I'll be working on my next book.
We Iranians are like cypress trees. We may bend and bend in the wind, but we will never break, says Kamin Mohammadi. The same spirit that is true to all women of the world. Women writers hardly ever shy from speaking their mind. Theirs is a fight for recognition, to restore their integrity and to express their suppressed anger. Caste system has been banned in India, but discriminations based on birth are still widely practiced. The problems of the Dalit and the effect of such practices on Dalit women is what writer Bama Faustina focuses on. If you could first tell me, now Dalit writing is a genre which is picking up in India very much. It is a loud protest. It's a voice against the violations that is. But what do you think is the situation today? I mean, how bad is the situation today?
Yeah, when I was a child, the caste practice or the discriminations were severe. Now, as years go by, there are changes. It is not practiced openly as it was, but it is there. In a very subtle way, it is practiced. And even today, in at least in the rural areas, you see double glass system in tea shops, one for the upper caste, one for Dalits. And of late, maybe a couple of years back, you must have heard about a big wall built in between a Dalit village and another upper caste village to separate them. Openly is built, and then the political parties get involved in that, and they broke the wall. So even today, the practice is there, but in a very subtle way.
Do you think one can equate this to maybe the black people protest in America?
Even my work and the works of Afro-American writers, they are compared and they are doing comparative study here in India. Like that, Alice Walker and Maya Angelou, so many writers were compared with me. And a lot of commonalities between blacks and the Dalits. And they said, black is beautiful, that is their slogan. And that liberated them. Same way here we say that you are Dalit and hold your head high. So that kind of psychological freedom we have got, and it is our identity. But the thing is there, the color united them. Here Dalits are, they are scattered here and there with different subgroups. It's not that easy to collect them as one group, as Dalits.
You have defined yourself as a Christian Dalit writer, but how right is it to be calling yourself a Christian Dalit writer, a Hindu Dalit writer, and dividing Dalit as a community into religion and bringing that aspect into it?
No, it is not I am dividing. I was born in a Christian family and I was brought up as a Christian girl. And naturally that Christian values and that has impact on my life, and that experiences will it will be shown in my writings also. But when we began to write, actually, we didn't categorize this literature as Dalit literature, but others did it. Same way, they have called me as, oh, she's a Dalit woman, she's a Christian Dalit woman, and she has written about this. So when people say, okay, let them say.
Do you mean to say that the way you write, you do not bring this Christian Dalit element at all into it? You write it in a very broad perspective as just a woman writing about her rights or about her community's rights?
Actually, this religion aspect, if you want to say, I am criticizing that religion. Criticizing by saying Christianity, in theory at least, it says all are equal. But in practice, it is not so. So I am bringing out that element, and I demand that Christianity should practice what it teaches.
If you take the Dalit element out of Christianity and just become one huge sect of Christian people, then what about all those people who want reservation in the aspect of Christian Dalit, in the name of Christian Dalit?
That is actually, it is a social injustice, I would say, because by becoming a Christian, the social condition is not changed, the economical condition is not changed. Then why they are segregating them, not giving reservations to them? I mean, in former days, the Dalits converted themselves into Christianity, hoping that at least there they will be treated as equal human beings. But it is not there also. So they are suffering there also, and here they have lost this also. That is the fact here.
When it comes to protesting, I'm talking about the community, are there other areas of creative expressions in which they protest, other than in terms of writing?
Oh yeah, there are art forms and music and performing arts. So there are a lot of other Politically also they have started different parties and Dalit movements are there, and effective songs, social awareness songs are there.
And there is also a rereading of the scriptures in a Dalit. Could you tell us a little about that?
When you read the Bible, we were taught mainly the forgiving nature, loving, caring, and be patient and humble like Christ. So this kind of elements only we were taught. But when now we look at the Bible and when we read it, we see the other revolutionary side of Jesus. Now he has said that don't ill-treat your brother, and he is as human as you, and you must love one another, whoever it may be. So this kind of things, and if some injustice act is done to you, you speak against them, you protest. So actually Jesus was killed because he took sides with the poor, with the women, with the sick. So he was with the marginalized people, that's why he was killed. So that side we are looking at, and we are trying to reread the Bible with our own perspective. And it is going on in Dalit theology, liberative theology.
You yourself are a primary teacher, but can you tell me, is there any effort to incorporate Dalit writing in the school syllabus, in textbooks?
In general, it is not there, but some individuals, like moral science books and textbooks they provide to different schools. In that, even from my first book, Karukku, a part of it was prescribed. And I, as a teacher, whenever I teach my students, I show the social aspect also. Not only the academic side, but the other side of the society. So this is not only academic education, but the social education.
So what, according to you, is the solution in a situation like this, where the government or the school authorities are not making a conscious effort, where there are voices, but there are minimal voices, or there are few voices?
Now the coming generation know what is going on here, and more this subaltern literature, it gives them an urge to free themselves.
You teach in a school, and when you impart such knowledge to your students, you're from Tamil Nadu, and that is a very conservative society. How was the reaction that you had with your...
Yeah, from the oppressor group, it is they don't like actually. I mean, they expect me to teach only the academic side, not the social issues. But the subaltern people, they like it. Oh, this is how it should be. So that kind of awareness they get. But so it is from one side I get one side they don't welcome me, the upper side. The other side they encourage me. So I live in this kind of confusion actually. But it is a kind of experimental life for me to protest and to raise my voice against, on behalf of these voiceless people.
If there is anything more that you would like to add to what you've said, as a message maybe to the people watching you.
In India, because of this caste system, some particular people determine and decide how human the other group can be, which is really a painful thing. So that should be stopped. Each one has the right to be their own, to live and to actualize their dream and to have their own space in this country.
Bama is a leading name in the growing Dalit literature tradition in India, and her two-sided struggle is directed towards cultivating self-respect among people in her own community while emerging as an important voice of protest. These women are but the 10th muse, and their writings but an expression and an extension of themselves. We salute the écriture feminine and these writings in another tongue.